start our meeting and open it up for us, please.
Kia ora everybody. Okay, he honore he krori he maungarongo ki te mato te whenua he whakaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa. Hanga e te atua, he ngā kauhau ki roto ki tēnā ki tēnā o mātou. Whakatongia mai tō wairua tapu hei awhina, hei tohu tui e mātou I roto I tēnei hui. Pai mārire.
Thank you, Donald.
For guidance and decision making, that it be prudent and diligent to help us in this evening, in this meeting. Kia ora.
Thank you, Donald. Okay, apologies. We have
some from the microphone.
I'm here actually. I've made it. Deb.
Oh, nice to have you here.
I flew back early. Thank you.
Right, we also have online Tom Turner, David Shepherd, Gary Whale from Kiwi Rail and Damien Flynn from Auckland Transport, listening intently. Confirmation of the agenda. You happy with the agenda? Yes. Disclosures of interest. Anybody regularly going on the train and wants to declare disclosure of interest? All right, so the first item is the subcommittee membership. Mark, do you want to run through this?
I'm happy to introduce it. The main thing, though, I would note is that we've received, subsequent to the paper being drafted and the resolution on the books, we've been clarified from the City Council in respect of Dave McPherson's member as an alternate to Ewan. And also we've received the confirmation of nomination of Don Turner from Waikato-Tainui. So hence the resolution that you see on the screen here is fractionally different to the one that you've got in the papers. Aside from that, I think we're just working through the formalisation of this committee with a view to doing the things that were set out in the previous papers that went to the working group in relation to providing improved visibility and transparency over this very significant activity for the region, but maintaining that, in essence, maintaining the membership of the former passenger rail governance working group.
Okay, so Donald, you'll be pleased that your name is there and you are being included at this meeting. Everybody happy with the proposed names that are on there? Eugene moves, Angela Strange seconds. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. That is the committee going forward. Minutes and actions from Te Hui Working Group, page 7.
Through Mr. Chair, if I may suggest we take this item as read, it was recommended by our democracy team effectively to provide some continuity between the between this and the working group, and to tie the two together. Obviously, with the actions as they stand, more than happy to take any questions and on those, but otherwise the intention is really just to provide some continuity of record between this and the working group.
So it's basically being received and noting if there's any errors on there, including in the minutes. So you've all read the last of the working group before we were formalised. Eugene moves, Ewan seconds. All in favour, please say aye. Thank you. We have got continuity between us old people and us older people back again for continuation. Right. We go to page 15, which is timetabling improvements. Philly, who's speaking to this?
Morena koutou. Ko Piribi King Toku Ingoa. I'm Phil King. I'm going to be working to support the work that Jose has been doing for the Regional Council for the next few months. So just by way of introduction to this paper, I suspect there'll be two halves to the conversation on this topic, and it would be useful to perhaps provide some context when we get to the option discussion later on, rather than trying to introduce it now.
Thank you. Can we also note that Jose is taking leave of absence for a period? He may be back or he may not be back, depending on the outcome of his leave of absence. So Phil, nice to have you in his place while he's away.
But yeah, otherwise the report taken as read, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Phil, for the brief introduction. Yeah, a number of things. Yeah, I was disappointed to read the letter from the Waka Kotahi board. Yeah, outlining their reasons for not providing any additional funding for extra services. You know, we've heard from passengers that, you know, the day is too long. More options would be needed to, you know, provide that frequency and give people confidence to take the train, knowing they don't have to have a really long day up in Auckland, say, if they're just going up for meetings. Also from corporates as well, that the day is too long for their meetings. Yeah, just incredibly disappointed. I was just wondering if anyone from Waka Kotahi could maybe provide a bit more context.
I can.
Thank you, Deborah.
Deborah,
Yeah.
please go.
Sure. So yes, you received the feedback. I think that the letter does speak for itself. The board is very keen on Te Huia. We are under a position, though, where we're under a lot of pressure on that fund. So the key words in reading that letter will be about, I can't remember what they say exactly, but it'll be about evidencing. So the original business case didn't support what you were asking for. If you make an amendment to the original business case, and I'm not talking about a full Monty, and you can demonstrate and provide the board with some evidence of the wisdom of the investment, then you're in better country. So it's not a no, it's just in how we operate as custodians of the Crown's dollars. They didn't have enough evidence on which to make a decision, but they'd be really keen to get some. They're right behind you. Also, part of that will be about sustaining the patronage level. So they're looking great, and they're going on in the right direction. And probably if we do proceed and do a little modification to the business case, you'll probably be in a position to demonstrate that sustained level. Really, what they're saying is they just didn't have the evidence they needed to make that kind of decision.
Thank you, Deborah. Could you just clarify around the modification of the business case, please?
So the business case originally went to and was approved by the board for a number of services, and the letter that was requesting an increase to that number of services, but it wasn't supported by any evidence, and they do need that. So what was asked for and approved by the board is what we're investing in. If you'd like the board to invest in something different, that's cool. You just need to modify the business case to say, and we'd like it to do this now, and this is the reasons and the evidence for that.
Thank you. Just wondering about the evidence. What sort of evidence are you looking for?
I don't know if we actually have any of the original writers of the business case. So, I mean, the original business case should just be used as a model and look at the sorts of things you provided last time and update it for the new ask, really. It's a relative.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's things like patronage, it's market research, it's all those kind of things that we have the information for. It's just not documented and presented to the board in a way that they can make a decision on yet.
Okay, thank you. Just a few further questions. Yeah, given that the business case was written pre-COVID and the nature of work has changed, hence commuting patterns have changed and everything has changed, and overall PT numbers across New Zealand and worldwide are experiencing a huge downturn, you know, what sort of realistic patronage numbers, you know, would give comfort to the Waka Kotahi board?
I think we're in a position where the BCR is still going to be an okay country. The sorts of levels that were proposed in the first business cases are the sorts of levels we're approaching now. So I think you're an okay country. I'm just really trying to say we can't make decisions without evidence and none was presented. And I think that we're in a position to be able to do that with the information we have. It needs to be a formal process where that's written down and resubmitted. There's a lot of goodwill and keenness to support it, but we just can't support changes to previous decisions without required evidence.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we do appreciate the support we have had and are, continuing to have from Waka Kotahi, so thank you for that. I have a few ideas around timetabling, but I'm just wondering in the flow of the meeting, the chair, when are you wanting discussions on option A, etc.?
You can go now. Want to?
Okay.
Lead off.
Yeah, thank you. Just looking through option A and acknowledging the growth that we have experienced with being able to attract passengers in both directions. Our slogan is connecting Waikato and Auckland. So allowing those passengers to travel northbound and southbound, throughout the day is really important, I believe, to growing patronage. I believe that the proposed option A of moving to 5 trips per weekday and losing that return Auckland market on the same day is, I don't know, I just would be hesitant to go in that direction. The other concern would be that we would lose the market that we're currently seeing from Huntly to the base and return during the daytime. I think for those communities it adds a really good PT connection that they otherwise might not experience. Also, once people experience the train, they're more likely to take it and maybe travel further on another occasion. So I just have a few questions around funding within the same funding envelope, acknowledging what Waka Kotahi have said and not providing any more funding at this moment, and trying to prove the case for more funding as well. So in the document, it told us that Thursday and Fridays were our busiest days. I'm just putting forward an idea, and I happened to see an email afterwards that I wonder if from HCC, and I'm wondering if we're on the same track, no pun intended, that instead of moving to 5 every single weekday, because every weekday is not equal, whether we redirect with, of course, approval from KiwiRail and agreed funding from Waka Kotahi, move to just try and do a bit of a pilot, prove our case for additional services on the Thursday and Friday, and offer 3 return trips on Thursdays and Fridays. I believe that would show good evidence, perhaps moving forward, without mucking around with the timetable too much. So we would keep our base timetable on 5 days and add in the extra return trip on Thursdays and Fridays. So that was part 1 of my early morning idea. The other idea was towards Saturdays. We've heard from the public and the evidence is there that Saturdays are our most popular day. However, harking back to the business case, Saturdays weren't really considered because it was a commuting train. But I was wondering, because we often have block of lines on Saturdays, and so we're not able to run every single Saturday, just had one clarification question. Is the funding for 2 return trips on a Saturday 52 weeks of the year? If somebody could clarify.
I understand that the costings are done on 50 weeks of the year.
50. So 50 weeks a
I
year?
believe it's 50 weeks of the year.
And just off the top of your head, do you know how many block of lines on Saturdays, or if Kiwira could clarify how many block of lines are we not able to run on a Saturday?
I haven't got that in front of me.
I think it's in the order of, it's Gary here, I think it's in the order of 15 to 20 weekends. If you're
Okay.
there's a planned schedule sort of 6 months in advance, but it is reasonably and over the next couple of years, very disruptive. So trying to have I guess one of our views was a consistent service, it becomes really fraught because every other weekend you're not running. So it gets very confusing for passengers.
Okay, thank you for that, Gary. I was just wondering, since we are funded for 2 return trips on 50 weeks of the year, and we've just heard that for 20 of those we're unable to run at all, whether we redirect the same funding envelope and offer 4 services on a Saturday, seeing that is our greatest demand, obviously timetabling permitting and funding permitting, whether that could be a good use for those people who are unable to commute during the week because of other work commitments. I'm thinking teachers, families, other ratepayers. I acknowledge it's not in the business case. However, it's within, hopefully, the same funding envelope if I'm along the right tracks. So yeah, just keen to possibly hear thoughts on those couple of ideas. And just finally, I just want to acknowledge central government and their half price fares as well, which I know are making a difference to petrol as well. So
So perhaps just by way of a general answer, the models that have been developed here have been based, as you say, on the existing budgets, and the budgets are set for a service to run all year, accepting that there will always be disruption to that timetable. The options that are presented are as close, I believe, as they could be to the tops of those numbers in terms of our budgets. And if we were to add both A and B, or add something and then add something else, we go over the top of the budget quite quickly. But it's not possible to do the financial modelling in the room to know exactly what the impacts would be. So if there's a direction on an option for us to consider, then we can take that away and do more work on it. Or find some other way of having a broader conversation about options and a wider conversation, but it's very hard to know the exact impacts of one or the other at this point.
thank you. Through the chair, perhaps we could, maybe have a bit of more discussion around this, but yeah, I'll turn off my light and allow someone else to speak, but thank you.
Deborah, can I ask you for clarification that if we identify how we would like to see the changes made and then produce the business case to make it happen, is that the way to go through, that we're not annoying you by saying this is what we're planning to do?
Well, you never annoy us, first. Second, there are a lot of ways that we can make changes that aren't business case related. So up until here, we've done a lot of things onto Huia without a business case. So there's a lot of latitude, and my hearing of Angela's message puts it in that box for me, rather than the ask that you took to the board. So look, I think we're happy to work with you on that, and I don't think everything needs a business case. It's just when you want to increase the service level by 50%, which was a request to the board, something at that level does. But what I'm hearing is talked about right now is about working inside the existing operating budget, and that would be something we'd be fine with us all just agreeing to do.
Thank you. Thank you for your ongoing support. And now that you've got a great number 2 man in there behind you there, we welcome his presence as well. Okay, so do you want to discuss further what Angela is saying? Russ, you had your light on before. I'm just trying to work on who had their lights on. Ewan, go.
No, go ahead. Russ was.
It takes a while to change it round, Ewan. Trust me. Go. You're the only one with a red light that says you can go.
Right. Look, thank you for the report. I didn't find aspects of it easy to understand the way you lay it out. I've got a series of questions. My first being, as a result of the improvements we did make by enabling for the first time traffic from Auckland to do a return service, could you tell me exactly the percentage of patronage numbers that have improved since the implementation of that variation?
I'm looking for the exact numbers. Certainly, it's a positive story, and it was helped both in part by the April school holidays and by the half-price fare promotion.
That's as good as you're going to get on that question.
Okay.
Remember again, Jose has done all this. He's got it all in his head, but he ain't here.
Right. So walk me through why you think your suggestion of option A, which, please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see that enabling Auckland originating traffic being able to come down during the day and return the same day. Or have I missed something?
So the market analysis that was done in September gave us an insight into the level of interest there would be in that trip. And we've attempted within that option to provide something. Appreciate that it's not necessarily everything that people would have wanted for that Auckland trip.
So if you just point to me where in the report it would show me whether or not I could do a return service during the week between Auckland and Hamilton, please. Same day. I think I can speed it up.
Yes,
you can't.
Effectively, you'd be similar to today, where you'd arrive at 12 and you'd leave at 2.
So when you look back at our business plan that formulated this entire premise, I've always believed, and I'm asking you whether or not fundamentally because it was commuter orientated and in a single direction out of Hamilton, with the inability to enable Auckland originating traffic to do a return journey. Was that not at the heart of why this has struggled initially?
Look, you must bear with us. That, you know, we've stepped into Jose's role here and getting up to speed as quickly as we can. But look, my understanding is initially the offering was through to Papakura, and by bringing on Puanui in the Strand later in the piece, then opened up the opportunity and a more rational proposition for offering services from Auckland down to Hamilton.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chair, I wonder if I could just, I don't want to ask any more of the questions because it's
You're
clear,
not going to get the answers.
I'm not going to get the answers, and I respect the fact you've been thrown in the deep end. I would like to have an opportunity to make a couple of comments to everyone, and they're sort of in line with some of the comments that I think Angela has already made.
In which case, yeah, give it a positive spin of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, look, I've had nearly 25 years of dealing with transport logistics. I've had some good outcomes and I've had some negative outcomes. But from those, you learn a lot of experience. But some of the fundamentals, and you'd be taught this at the first day at any university course on logistics and movements of traffic, is that you can't operate in a single direction and not provide both ends of the route to have open access back and forth in the single day. So it makes no sense to me for us to be operating to Huia that does not enable Hamiltonian originating traffic return in the same day, and also Auckland originating traffic to be able to depart Auckland, come down for the day and return in the same day. It would be like Air New Zealand only offering Hamilton to Wellington, but nobody could fly Wellington to Hamilton. It would be nonsensical. And so what I'm seeing in front of me is the suggestion is a nonsensical suggestion, and actually it goes back to what we had before that wasn't working. The other thing that I would say to you is when you analyze a route, you would often look at the days where your market is telling you you have demand. And a quick analysis of performance tells me that Wednesday, Thursday, and a Friday are really important days. Fridays nearly outstrip Saturdays. And I would also say that on a Saturday, there's an opportunity for growth. So what I'd be advising, and I'd be happy to sit down with you for an hour with a spreadsheet and I could give you a schedule that I think would work, and more importantly, would be based on actual performance data, is that we should be operating sort of Monday to Wednesday, the current schedule, and then debate whether or not on the Wednesday or the Thursday, but definitely on the Friday, add that third service and add an additional rotation on a Saturday. And I believe you could do that roughly within the current budgeting restraints. And then what that would enable us to do is proactively market to both market segments in Auckland and Hamilton, both the commuter and the VFR, the visiting friends and relatives and the leisure traffic, and say that on Wednesdays and Fridays, you can definitely come down if you're an Auckland business person and do a return day business trip. And if you're a leisure traveller, you could go up on a Friday and come back on our Saturday from Auckland. And these are the types of incremental improvements that will revolutionise the success of Te Huia. So I think we need to start again. I don't think it would take long to get it right, but what is being proposed here would put us back 12 months.
Ewan, expand on that. If you leave the current schedule as it is and bring in the extra service, are you expand that? You're looking at the second engine and train staying in Auckland and coming down from Auckland. What are you flesh it out for me?
My understanding is the reason we are operating currently with a locomotive on each end of the consist is because of the safety aspects, and I believe that eventually we're going to have resolved that, and that will no longer be required. My suggestion simply requires that on a Wednesday and a Friday, and I'm happy to discuss whether it's a Wednesday or a Thursday because the data is actually very close, right? The data is close. All I'm suggesting is a third return service, because currently, if you're originating from Auckland, you have a 2-hour window in Hamilton. So if I want to come down from Auckland on the current schedule, I can stay in Hamilton for just over 2 hours. That's all, unless I'm willing to have an overnight. Yeah, and that's just not enough time. So by adding that third service on 2 days of the travel week, I'm suggesting either a Wednesday or a Thursday / but definitely a Friday, we would be able to offer, I think, at least a 6-hour day in Hamilton from Auckland originating traffic. And Hamilton originating traffic would get a much shorter day if they wanted to. They could have the long day or the shorter day. Now, isn't that convenient? That's what airlines offer, that's what bus companies offer, and that's what most train services offer around the world, apart from to Huia.
Okay, Gary Whale, can I go to you and ask for comments? Is what we're proposing feasible?
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of observations or a couple of comments along the way as we're doing it. I guess one of the premises here of you are, in terms of determining your timetabling, you are restricted by the assets you have, and in terms of as you look at various timetabling options, you're trying to work out whether ultimately we can fit our resources that we have, our locomotives and our carriages, into those timetables in an efficient way. And certainly crewing is another one. When I hear we're having a timetable for 3 days of the week and then on the last 2 we'll do something different, that makes it really challenging for the crew to crew it, and it's actually an expensive option from a cost perspective. The other element is if all of a sudden you get an option that requires another locomotive, for example, that is an expensive piece, because either you have that you're procuring that locomotive for either a week, the whole year, or just every other day. If it's every other day, that becomes really tricky and inexpensive from our perspective, because we're sort of giving you a loco for a day and then taking away, and it's really difficult to balance. And financially, there's some real challenges with that. So I guess the other thing with timetables is I was just thinking as well, if you wanted in a day, you could have a mirrored timetable that the trains left Auckland and Hamilton the same time. And so you had 2 train sets and they pass each other halfway along, and you're actually mirroring the timetable each way. But that requires the assets to be positioned in a different place each day, and then there's servicing challenges. So with all of and I respect you and the logistics, you understand all of that, but I just felt it's a very fine balance in trying to balance you're constrained because of the assets we have and the number of assets we have with what options we have in terms of flexibility. Once we get the ETP running rights, absolutely, it's a bit of a game changer because it frees up locomotives and the like. The other observation I'd say is that, and it's sitting inside the risks there, is that with that 5 service timetable, you are increasing your risk profile of running the services as well, because all of a sudden, once you deploy all of your assets all at once, and we have this issue, David, Deb, we've certainly had this issue with the scenic services where we deploy all our assets at a busy period. If one of them breaks, you've got nowhere to go. So you're then left with giving a suboptimal service. So it's a fine balance between risk taking and revenue optimizing and cost minimizing. So that's where I guess the spreadsheets and the analysis start to, where Jose and the guys will end up working that through. But I just felt it's worth understanding or commenting on those elements, that it's a real fine balance to get this right. And you have to decide what priorities, which one do you want? Do you want the Auckland market or the Hamilton market? Which is the priority? And at the moment, you've leveraged towards the Hamilton market first, and so you've traded off the Auckland market, but you can't have both, right? So
well, look, Gary, thank you for that. I've got a number of questions that fall out of that, and first of all, I reject totally your characterisation that we have to choose one market over the other. That is, with respect, nuts. So my first question is our current staffing levels. Our current staff are paid for a 40-hour week?
Yes.
Right. And so in terms of the actual level of utilisation, what's the level of utilisation?
Well, it depends on what the roster, on how you're doing.
There must, with all due respect, sir, there must be an average. I could have told you the average of the amount of flight hours my pilots flew or my cabin crew flew. What's the average? You must know that.
I've got a couple of team online who can support me. I don't have the number off the top of my head.
Well, clearly, with all respect, you must have known that because you raised it as a concern. You said that staff shortage meant that this couldn't happen. So why don't you know the information?
We can get that for you. I don't know.
That would be helpful, and that may help form your advice to us in the next discussion. The second matter I'd like to ask you, if I could, in regards to the locomotives, I think I heard you say that the concern you raised is no longer a concern the minute we get the ETP.
No, in the option B that's put forward, or option A, I think that's put forward, there is a requirement for a fourth loco. And at the moment, there's only 3 allocated. So the proposal is effectively using all the cars, and therefore having no spares, and also then a requirement of a fourth locomotive to enable it for the process to work.
So just help me, in the year that roughly we've been operating, how many times has Te Huia broken down where you've needed to use the spare loco?
I would say there's been a handful of times where the locomotives have been swapped out before the services start. So very few, but the spare is there for that very reason.
So you're saying currently, operationally, you're not able to do 3 rotations a day with the current locomotives and the rolling stock?
Based on the timetable they put forward, no.
Right. So that wasn't what I asked. If we altered the timetable, could you operate 3 rotations a day?
You'd have to tell me what the timetable was before I could answer that. Sorry.
So how quickly could you have your team work out whether or not it's possible? Because at the end of the day, correct me if I'm wrong, we're paying for a service, you're a service provider. You're hearing your clients say that actually we believe the Auckland and the Hamilton market are jointly connected, and that they are essential to provide the types of load factor we require, that we want people to be able to spend a day in either city and return. Could you and your team come up with a schedule that achieves that?
Yes, I think it depends on what you're trying to solve for first. If you're trying to optimize the use of the rolling stock, then absolutely we can come up with some timetable options that optimize the use of the rolling stock. If you want to optimize a timetable that you think will maximize patronage, then we'll have to then back solve as to what rolling stock do you need that matches to that timetable. So the answer is it depends on what you're seeking to solve for. So if you want to optimize the use of the rolling stock and minimize the amount of rolling stock you're putting in play, we can absolutely do some timetables that solve for that. The same thing if you wanted to optimize for crew and had crew running efficiently, and you were having, as much utilization of the 40-hour weeks of the crew you'd solve for the crew timetable as a timetable. So it does depend on what you're trying to solve for. In this case, these options are putting different timetables at play and then overlaying the rolling stock requirement to deliver to those timetables. And what it's saying is it's putting additional rolling stock requirement and increasing the risk because you're using the spares that you otherwise had in the previous scenario. So that's because of cause and effect. You've got the timetable started first to set the agenda for the rolling stock requirements.
So obviously, have you not been involved in the discussions with Jose in trying to put together what we currently have in front of us?
No, we've had those timetables presented to us and we've responded to him, and our views are reflected in the paper in terms of some of the risks.
All right, just one final question. The ETP, when is that going to be finished?
We are on track for that. I guess we're looking at towards the end of July now for the full installation to be completed. So,
And that's slightly behind schedule.
Slightly behind schedule. You know, we have had, as everyone, COVID issues and
Sure, that's fine. But that will mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that we don't need both locomotives on each consist.
That is correct.
And so if we chose as a committee to sit down and rework out a time schedule that enables both markets to utilise the service, that you would work as proactively as you could to be able to roster and operate that.
That is correct, and if it required additional staff to meet the timetable, or in fact, if we could free up staff, if it optimised it from that perspective, we would free them up. So we would ultimately respond to whatever timetable that is agreed and funded, and we would have pointed out what the cost and the requirements would be. So yes, absolutely.
Just one, if I could, I'm sorry. When you operate the Northerner or any of your passenger rail services, do they all operate focused on one direction? So you're not interested in, market originating from Auckland. You only want to bring people from Wellington to Auckland.
Absolutely not. But I guess with both of those, or all three services, there is a natural flow of tourism throughout New Zealand, and it is south to north. So you do have natural tourism flows that flow through. So there are, in the Northern Explorer, there are more people that will go south to Wellington than there are that come north from Wellington.
But Gary, you would have heard that since we've enabled Auckland originating traffic to travel down and return on the same day, that those loads have been quite encouraging. So to suggest that it's only one way would not be at all interpreting the data we have in front of us.
Sorry, I wasn't suggesting that at all.
Oh, right. Okay, thank you.
David Shepherd, can I go to you, who have intimate knowledge of this whole thing, and you're waving at me there with a whole lot of answers?
I put my hand up, put my hand down, but I think the key point that I just wanted to make, and you were quite correct, the original business case and proposition that was put forward was for a predominant commuter flow going from Hamilton to Auckland, and the assets that were obtained and procured for that service are obviously at play. As a test environment, certainly Waka Kotahi is really keen to test and try, and this is exactly what you're doing, is fine-tuning and pushing right up against it. And I think the opportunity to explore Auckland to Hamilton markets is the right thing to be doing. The difficulty that we have is that we are constrained by the original submission. So I'm not. What I'm hearing from Gary is, if there was more locomotive power or an alternative sort of plan that could have been factored in, it would be that much easier to kind of access and do the options that you're sort of proposing. The original business case, unfortunately, didn't have your wisdom at the table, didn't afford us that opportunity.
So part of the fault is yours, David, that you should have advised us that we should have included that in our original business case, in which case we wouldn't be in this mess that we are today.
As any good supplier, we do listen to our customer, so it goes both ways.
And the counterflow was talked about way back at the start, before I think even you were involved, Mr. Chair.
David, thank you for your comments. Russ.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. We're all in the same boat on this issue, and the thing is, well, most of us are. We've got one that it says there's only 10 passengers a day from our council. It's terrible when people make those statements, but in fact, luckily the public don't believe that, because they love this train. They consider it their train, it's their brand, and it looks terrific. And we've come through a lot of hurdles, a lot of challenges to where we are today. I just looking back, say in the military area, Huia, and you as an officer, to say that this is the plan, it reminds me a little bit of August the 10th, 1917, when General Haig was confronted with Passchendaele, of which my grandfather copped it the first day. And we're going to go over the top. We are going to take Passchendaele, and yet 500,000 men later, he kept to the what the plan was, but the plan was actually flawed. They weren't nimble, and go to Tynecott Cemetery, and it's all for there to see, the biggest kind of massacre of New Zealand soldiers and Australians, even worse than Gallipoli. So to say that this is the plan, it was the plan, but it was a start-up, we agree with that. Taking off in the middle of the night, the ghost train, some of us warned about that, but we've still got to put that behind us. We are now getting on the brink of success. Our danger is that we will most probably have a change of government next year, and they are not pro public transport. And if you listen to the leader of the opposition on Q&A, probably around about 5 minutes of his rant was really to Huia, and that's $100 million waste of money. And we can't risk to lose it to Huia. Therefore, we've got to make it work. At the same time, we don't want to kind of piss off the board of Waka Kotahi. We've had a good relationship with them, particularly with the chair, Sir Brian Roach, and I think he pushed the boundaries to actually make this thing happen. But we've got to increase the patronage. This morning, the southbound State Highway 1 at Green Lane, absolutely chocker. You know, about 2 hours wait. You know, this plays into the hand. All wind blow some good into the Te Huia. The Te Huia has a great future, but we've got to now see how we can actually even make it better. And we've got to be, rather than just be the Passchendaele mentality, we've got to say, how can we make it work better? The gold card we introduced, I think, was a winner, because the media don't care one tit, if I may say, about profit. I don't think with $100 million or $96 million investment, we've got to make certain the numbers game. This is a numbers game. And over 200, we start to get the carbon footprint on the right side. It ends up to be very positive. And when you got Mr. Good at the Waikato Chamber of Commerce knocking it, that's his role, quite right-winger. But he's going to get special kind of information from the university, and perhaps bias, may I say that, to say that it's not working. But numbers will make this thing work. We've got a consultant, Mr. Paul Loof. He said, I want to use your train. Well, I can't have your meeting just for 2 hours. I want to use your train. So we, I think, have to be flexible enough and entrepreneurial enough and take some risk. We had to take some risk, Gary, on this, because we've got 3 bloody trains, if I may say. And we've got to get bums on seats, as Councillor Wilson said. There is some risk. But the risk is, with a change of government, this service will be curtailed. And that means it will not be reinstated probably in certainly my lifetime. Probably that might suit some people, but I believe it will be, we've got to make it work. The gold card is terrific. Let's be flexible in the hours. We have always had the Hamilton-Auckland, and I'm as bad as the rest of them, that kind of mindset. We've got to actually look at other opportunities to better utilise the $96 million of an investment to ensure that we can actually prove to the public, prove to the negative people, the naysayers, that this is an awesome service that's growing, and it will grow. I think it's going to be a great success. And we've had great people around this table, including you, David. You know, you've had to bat for it. NZTA have batted around their board. You've been terrific, terrific. But we've got to give you the tools to make certain that we, in the public's eyes, get bums on seats. And that goes right through to Minister Wood. We owe it to him to make this project work. And we've got to better utilise the infrastructure, the investment we have. And 2 hours ain't going to cut it. So let's get our thinking caps on. We're all in the same boat together. Let's make it work.
Thank you, Russ. And for the record, Haig was a total bloody idiot that shouldn't have been in charge of 2 men, let alone a whole bloody army.
Well, it cost my grandfather his life.
Yeah,
The army people.
Yes. It was a bloody disaster. Dave.
Yeah, what's the other one? They say no war plan survives contact with the enemy. Yeah, something like that anyway.
Do you want a coffee?
Yeah, White, thanks. See, Russ is good, making me a coffee. Look, sorry, I just want to firstly echo things that Ewan and Russ have said and point out a bit of the genesis of Te Huia, which I think we're getting a bit lost in some of the technical arguments. It was a political decision at the start. It was a Labour Party election promise, who became the government, who implemented the promise, and we in the Waikato enabled them to do that consciously. We said, there's their election promise. It's a strategy that we want to follow. How can we help them deliver their election promise? And that's why it got through, not because we followed NZTA processes at the start. And you'll recall at the start, this was not called a business case. It was called as such, not in the normal sense. It was a startup proposition. Those words startup were used. We always envisaged there would be continuous improvement, additions, alterations, tweaks to make it work better. Before we started the train, we were talking about improvements we want to make along the way when we could. And that's what we're doing now. And I'd say to the NZTA board, it seems like maybe they are on that wavelength. That's what we're talking about here, how we can make within the budgets that are available or can be made available, how we can make the next tweak that will improve it or the next improvement. And we called it stage 1A and 1B and things like that deliberately, because we knew we weren't going to be able to do the whole thing from day one. And one of the things we talked about was how to get passengers back down from Auckland in a usable way. And in the last 2 or 3 months, for the first time, I've had Aucklanders singing the praises of Te Huia or saying they wanted improvements in it. They didn't care a rat's ass for the 3 years before that about Te Huia because it wasn't relevant to them. Suddenly it started becoming relevant, and we'd be nuts to reduce that relevance. We'd be nuts not to increase that relevance in actual fact. That's what I think about that. So I appreciate the points that Jose and Phil made and Gary's making, but I think you do have to a little bit go back to the drawing board. What's the available resource and what's the best mix that we can get out of it, and look at some timing issues. That whole thing that Gary was talking about seemed to say with the ETP you can't do certain things. Okay, but that situation is going to be improved from end of July onwards. So, what's the problem? It may be just a timing issue. May have to delay for 3 or 4 weeks before you can start some of the services, say, that Ewan's talking about, and things like that. So I think we're sort of approaching this in a way a little bit too technically. Let's see what do we want to achieve and when can we achieve them. And in doing that, we will help the government, like Russ said, at the moment, by keep constricting the service into sort of business case parameters in a technical sense. We're not going to be helping the government's case or anyone's case for more PT and more rail at all. And Russ has made an important point. We've maybe got a 15-month window to really get it working, to make it impossible to kibosh. If we don't do that, and politicians around here can say this sort of thing, technicians can't. If we don't do that, we run a real risk, because the leader of the opposition has singled this out, like Russ said. And one of our local MPs, being such a great supporter of the city, David Bennett, has also singled it out as well for mention and dispatches there. So, it's the biggest risk is not the technical risks that have been identified. They should affect timing and things like that. Perhaps the biggest risk is the political risk, guys. Get your head around that, please, and work out ways to make what we want happen as soon as possible. Just think about Auckland. We're trying to get about 1% of Waikato residents on that train in a year. That's about the figure I roughly worked out. We only need to get 0.1% of Aucklanders on the train, and we've doubled those numbers. So it's actually quite a good proposition to have a return service that we can market to Auckland. We're getting Aucklanders to use it now because they're hearing through word of mouth. What could we do if we actually marketed it up there? I'm saying, so there's some other things that I'd like us to throw into the mix, which may be the next tweak, you know, Sunday evening services. How do we get Hamiltonians up there on a Saturday morning to stay for the weekend and come back at the end? We talked about that after the block line finishes on Sunday evening. When can we do that? You know, we want to get people who Aucklanders come down on Friday night and be able to go back on Sunday night for work the next week. Things like that, you know, that Sunday night service, and same with public holiday evening services potentially as well. You know, we've got those options that we should think about, and I think then we're going to have a service that we can market right through the Upper North Island. So let's think a little bit bigger.
Okay, you'll have a look on the screen. We're sort of saying statements without any reference to what we're trying to decide. So we put up there option C, which is more in line with what we're hearing on the...
You're just seeing these handsome faces.
To make it pretty simple, and in relation to the comments that we made, I think it covers there. An alternative option within allocated funding is evaluated, seeking 3 return services on high patronage weekdays and additional Saturday services on select weekends. That doesn't tie you into anything. It broadly says what we're trying to achieve, and then it's going back working with NZTA, Kiwi Rail, and staff to try and see what within that parameter can actually work.
Kia ora, through the chair.
Speaking order.
Point of order, was it? Yeah, we need to improve it. If we don't improve it, we're history. But we need to improve it so that we get numbers on there and we don't blow the budget. If we do that, we've got an argument to say to the incoming government, this is working, it is growing. You would be stupid to take it out.
Mr. Chair.
I've got Eugene and then I'll go to Don Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just trying to pull this all together a little bit is we're all well aware that it's huge frustration when we keep referring back to our original business case. That is really hamstringing this whole process going forward. Understand Waka Kotahi have to work with that, but they do have to realise, which they probably do, is it's a totally different environment from when that business case was set to now. So, you know, we have to logically think about working around that. The other thing is too, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Strange are coming up with ideas that are quite logical, are very logical, and all doing their best to push this forward to make better outcomes. And at the end of the day, it's all about bums on seats. So these are very logical things. So I think we're looking at these options that are in front of us, and none of them are really quite workable. So Councillor Strange's comments around about the Saturday service. So we're funded for 50 weeks. I think we were just told of the year when we know we've got 15 to 20 blocks of line on Saturdays. So why could we not utilise and having that extra return trip on the Saturdays around the school holidays when we know it's extremely busy and really popular? So, you know, that's going back to Deb's original comments, is that should keep within our funding envelope with our funded trips. And then also working on the Wednesday or the Friday or the Thursday and Friday extra return trips, the 3 return services, because that will get us. We don't need to do that every day of the week, simply because we can promote that. As we promote that going forward, we're going to get business people knowing that Wednesday they can come down and have meetings, or Friday they come down and have meetings. Very easy to do, as in promoting that side of things. So I think we need to go back, go to your comments, Gary, around you know, the crewing of the service and that extra locomotive. But then we talk about the ETP and it coming in very soon. So if we have to introduce these in October or something like that, let's do it then. But we need to understand, not just here now, that the crew could be an issue or the locomotive could be an issue, because we don't know that. We're just guessing. So we need to put these Saturday options forward and the Wednesday, Thursday or Friday options forward to come back to us to give us a proper package to move this forward better. So I'd like to know how do we process, how do we go back to that point? How do we?
Your option
process
C
that?
gives you the ability to do that.
Okay, so okay. If we look at option C,
Yeah.
we need to know whether those constraints are going to be crew constraints.
Yeah, and that will all
locomotive
come out of that.
constraints, so we
We're
need
setting
to-
the high level direction of where we want to go.
Yeah, and the other point is too, is Councillor Strange brought up before, is, you know, we've been working quite hard, and Susie, I know that she has left here, but Susie did a lot of work around promoting that Huntly service into the base, et cetera, et cetera. We want to keep that because that's improving all the time. I don't know the current figures, but the other thing is it's getting people onto the train. You know, people I talk to in Huntly love that service and they're talking about it all the time. Now they'll start going to the base net. Next trip might be into the city, you know, into Auckland, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to make sure we're keeping that in if we really want to be growing those numbers.
So should we cancel
Truck
the
service.
bus service from Huntly to the
Bus
base?
service is good, so.
Yeah, but make them all go on the train.
Well, we only got one trip though, so it's not good at the
Thanks for
moment, so.
discussing buses,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Just discussing the
We're
train.
talking our funding options. Yeah.
Thank you, Eugene. Donald. Go.
Yeah, kia ora everyone. I'd just like to reiterate Councillor Strange, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Patterson, and even NZTA in the suggestion of helping us move forward. And I think right from the beginning, we started with a business case scope, and we've worked through that. But what's actually happened is over time, we've actually created a lot of opportunity to bring patronage in a lot of various ways, which is included in what everyone has said. I think my addition to what's been said already is the strategic rail discussion about going to Tauranga, about going and opening up the rail as a mode of transport seriously for all. And just to remember the messaging is that if we can connect rail with rapid rail, with all the other rail discussions, that we need to somehow integrate that to support our case as well. Because after COVID, people need and want to move in between regions safely and enjoy it. And I believe, like Russ has said, this service can provide that. So I think that's the addition is about the tauranga aspect of rail from Hamilton, from Kirikiriroa, as well as from Kirikiriroa to Tamaki Makaurau and reverse. And I do agree with Councillor Wilson that we need to provide for people in Auckland to come south, as well as us as we first started going to Auckland. So that's just the addition there, Chair. And I support all the cordial that's occurred. Kia ora.
Thank you, Donald. Angela.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak again. I was just had a thought that we've heard that the business case needs modification. I was wondering if we add into the recommendation that we direct appropriate people to modify the business case as soon as possible, or words to that effect. If anyone's got better wordsmithing, that would be great.
I'll get Mark to answer that.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. What I've heard from Waka Kotahi so far is that we have been constrained to some extent by the scope of the business case. At the same time, the signals that we've had at this meeting so far has been the scope of what we've been suggesting in terms of the additional return services on high patronage weekdays and possibly additional Saturday services may indeed be within the broad scope of the current funding envelope and may not require an amendment to the business case. So taking that on board is really not to say that an amendment to the business case might not be required and shouldn't be explored. I think that's absolutely something for us to take away. There are several things that the business case currently doesn't contemplate. Importantly, southbound patronage and that southbound market, not just from Auckland, but also from Waikato towns. We'll hear shortly about something that might also generate some southbound travel. The leisure services as well. And I think that does warrant us looking at the business case to make sure that as we go forward and as we move towards the 2-year review, that 2-year review will be done against the business case, and we want to make sure that the success that those things are generated are, the success that those are generated are measured in terms of our business case, because that's what Waka Kotahi will look at. That does, however, give us a little bit more time in terms of that amendment to the business case, then potentially to simply make these improvements in the really agile fashion that I think the committee's after. So I just wanted to add that.
Procedure. I'm out of my play area, so I'm not quite sure of your standing orders, but usually I'd say procedural question. Okay, so a procedural question on the current motion. Would the mover, who is the current mover of? Nobody has moved any of those. Okay. All we've done is give you a wonderful. Right. So what I was going to do was engage with the mover, whether or not we add point 3, which would in fact encompass a couple of things. I think it should be actually 3 things. A letter is written to the chair of Waka Kotahi, thanking them for their letter and saying we are in the midst of reviewing our business plan, and you can expect something to come in the very near future. That's a holding point. The third point I would say is that we are instructing staff to undertake an analysis of the current business plan, run an additional SWOT analysis of the current patronage data, right? And determine, which would include Sunday evening services, public holiday services, as part of what we've also agreed. I haven't been very articulate, but I think you're getting my thrust.
How can you bring that in? I want to bring it too specific on there. I want to be reasonably open.
So this would enable whoever does the review of the business plan to be cognitive of all of those elements. Oh, I think, well, with respect, I think we do. I think because there are 2 steps here. We can do some fine tuning within the current funding envelope. We know that. Waka Kotahi has articulated that. But what they've also said is that they're somewhat a slave to the original business plan. And we're saying that the market has evolved for multiple reasons, and that we're signalling that we're going to present them a variation. So we're going to live within the flex that we've got currently with some incremental improvements, but we are sending Waka Kotahi a message. We think you no longer should be a slave to the original business plan, and this is why. Here's the data. This is the way we're going to go forward.
Except what you're saying. We are going to therefore adjourn discussion on this item. We will adjourn discussion on this particular item while the clever staff members will come out with a resolution that reflects broadly what we're doing, so that we get some decent words into there and exactly what we're trying, and we will then look at that when it comes through and decide whether to adopt it. We've got an understanding of what is wanted. So therefore, let's craft that into the specific wording and we'll bring it back. So if we adjourn discussion on this particular item, we now move to the next agenda item.
I just got a question, Jane, on you. Did you know? I think it's great, you and what you're suggesting, but please emphasise in that letter, we're not looking for extra dough, because I mean, Whakakotahi is cash strapped. So that's the first thing that's going to kind of appease them. Secondly, I think do emphasise in that letter what you made very eloquently in regard to Auckland to Hamilton, that we're not just constrained. Lastly, but not least, I think it's very important that we really emphasise that, you know, it's success, but we want to build on the success. But when we did that business case, which I think we've said a couple of times this morning, it's a new world out there. Fonterra working from home. The people that supported us a bit embarrassed, but they don't need to be embarrassed because it's after COVID-19, it's a whole new world. They're not using the damn train. You can't blame them for that, but we need to be nimble enough to make certain we can change step.
Thank you, Russ. Deb, do you want to make an advisory comment to us on this matter, please?
I was going to, but Russ has actually covered it in that I'd heard the conversation around Auckland. It wasn't in the notes. I think we popped that in. Patronage is patronage. You want those bums on the seats and you'll take them from either end. I think please just make sure that that's noted. I think it will strengthen your case.
Thank you for that. We will now adjourn that item and we will go to page 35, which is confirmation of Te Huia demand targets.
Okay, so by way of introduction, as a result of the letter from Whakakotahi, as we've been discussing, the indication was that we would look to continue to deliver based on the existing business case targets, which is stated in the report. So on the basis of the things that have changed as a result of those letters and the conversations we've just had, this paper just seeks to get reconfirmation on those targets. And from that, give us a sense of the direction of investment or change that's needed to achieve that over the time period of the remaining time period of the trial.
Chair, surely this work would be part of any sort of view of...
Yes.
Sorry, I don't think they could hear you there.
I can't hear you online.
Neither do we.
In the queue.
Oh, okay. I'm not...
Leave the green light on.
Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Patience is wins out every time. Yeah, I agree with what you were saying in the background, Ewan, but I'll let you speak to that. I just have an issue with the recommendation as it's worded. And again, it harks back to that original business case, which is based on commuting numbers. Yeah, I don't agree that the average weekday demand targets should be the only measure of our success. I would advocate that it is changed to daily demand targets to include Saturdays as well, in recognition of all of our ratepayers, some of whom can't make use of the service Monday to Fridays, and Saturdays is literally their only option. However, I understand the business case, so yeah, I'm just not sure of the way forward. Yeah, but thank you.
So what are you saying for daily week services? We should have what? All right, Phil, are you going to tell us what this is?
I'm just interpreting Angela's question, which was, I think that you wanted that average to go across 7 days as opposed to just 5 days.
6 days.
That would be
6 days.
Yeah, that would be a change to the targets in the business case, effectively.
Yeah,
So,
which goes back to my whole point.
but if I could just add a comment that goes back to the last discussion, there is an addendum to the business case underway at the moment, and we reference it in some of the later reports. There's work going on to review in the background how the strategic case has evolved as a result of current government policy statement, the emissions reduction plan, and a whole range of things that have changed in the national space, but also to take account of the opening of the City Rail loop in Auckland and other business cases that are underway. So we touch on that in later reports. So your discussions about the business case being amended and updated and changed to some extent are underway in the background.
Deb's got a advisory comment. I'll go with you first, Deb.
Thanks. And it was to reinforce the messages before. The business case is not supposed to be impediment. I would encourage you to think about it, and this is probably a message more for the officers, about helping sense break out. So we don't want to hear the same thing that you said in the last business case because time has moved on. We do want to hear what real life looks like now. Real life is a 7-day service. Real life is both ways. So please don't understand what I said before to be copy and paste into what you had last time. We definitely want to see what the sensible option is. We are not hoping to constrain you at all. We're hoping to enable it all. Does that help?
Thank you. Yes. Ewan.
I couldn't have put it better myself. I think that's exactly what I think I was. Debbie, you were a lot more articulate than I was. And so I was just hoping that in the review that we were not only going to look at national policy statements and multiple other legislative frameworks, etc., but actually real hard patronage data and what the market is telling us. And the market's telling us is this is a 7-day-a-week service, that the market segmentation is some commuters, a lot of VFR, some leisure, it's all sorts. And we believe there is a market and we've got to tailor our service to meet that market aspiration. And that is a lot different to what the view was a few years ago. And so I want us to decouple from the original plan. You like that? And come forward with actual trading history and the latest customer data. And I think that will tell you that this is a 7-day-a-week mixed commuter leisure, visiting friends and relative service.
Yes, don't disagree.
Okay.
The other part that's important is that this is a post-CRL discussion. That means that we're talking about after 2024, 2025. If we're talking about post-CRL, we're talking about after the opening of the Sea Rail Loop in 2024 or 2025, which is beyond the end of the current trial period.
But respectfully, I don't think we should try to get bogged down too much in that for a number of reasons. First of all, AT is still not, I don't hear AT being particularly tolerant of inter-regional passenger rail services when CityLink's up and running, because that has been their position. And the only thing is going to change is if the government, the MOT, was to issue a policy on inter-regional passenger rail. So you begin to raise CityLink now, and it becomes complicated. We've got to focus within the term of the trial in meeting the market. Don't add, in my opinion, respectfully, don't add an additional complexity at this intermediate step. I think that would be a backward step, in my opinion.
Thank you, Donald.
Yeah, kia ora, just reiterating, and by giving a euphemism of like it's like we started off like a mushroom, and we're growing, and we're expanding as light is sort of shining along our journey, and also that a message of this being a transport strategy that links to like policy statements of climate change, etc., etc. And this is could possibly be a viable option to and from the Waikato region to Tamaki to Tauranga to the east as well. That's growing and has a whole lot of potential for our members of the public in all regions. So just wanting to share that as well, but totally agree with Councillor Wilson that we're in an exciting time that we can be enabled by NZTA. Kia ora, waka kotahi.
Thank you, Donald. David Shepherd.
It's just a small point with regards to kind of the longer term conversation with timetabling in and out of Auckland. Please be aware that Auckland is doing a program business case that is looking at future demand and does include interregional rail service. I believe in an hourly service, I think there's a provision for two services per hour. So it is part of the longer term thinking and is a part of the wider mix. Obviously, at the moment, it is quite constrained given the number of routes in and out of Auckland, and it is an ongoing operational kind of struggle, but that's a national issue, and it's a national issue that is currently being looked at in a wider forum.
Hugh, could I just ask a question about coming out of that?
Yep.
Thanks for that, David. And I see Damien there as well. Is part of what they're looking at in terms of interregional rail, looking at the situation with the Northern Explorer, or whatever it's called. I can't remember the name. It's been so long since it was going, when that starts in October, from memory, thereabouts. Looking at how that sort of factors in potentially into this service, certainly into use of the same facility, but also the use of the Strand and the viability of the current, I was going to call them facilities, but that would be expanding their status more than it actually is, that they're, seriously, the arrival at the Strand is becoming a commentary point there, and the difficulty of access, the lack of PT connections to it, the lack of directions even, the fact that you hope like hell for a fine day if you're trying to get to and from the Strand when you get to Auckland, things like that. So I'm just wondering if that, the connection to the start of the interregional rails at the Strand is part of what's being looked at, because otherwise that's I'm glad that AT and Aucklanders are looking at that. Is that?
There was a statement rather than a question, so nobody.
No, it was not. It was no. I said, are they looking at the rest of it? What happens when you get there, or how you get there?
Damien, like to comment.
As a program business case, the main focus is on the network capacity to meet all the market needs. The end of journey last mile is being considered, but it won't be in the level of detail that you perhaps would want. That would be a specific Te Huia type development level of detail beyond the program business case.
Well, I'm making the point that if you're looking at interregional rail, then it's clearly not just Te Huia. It'll happen elsewhere perhaps, but there's the Northern Explorer you've got there, the Kiwi Rail starting up, and goes to the same place.
Sorry, Gary.
When we had to start Te Huia here, we had to look at how people would get to and from Frankton and Rotorua stations, and had to really heavily factor that in. So I'm just wondering whether Auckland can start looking at what might be needed there. I'm not even talking about who pays for it, just you're in the best position, presumably, to look at connections and all of that sort of stuff.
Gary Whale, you had a comment on this.
Yes, Chair, certainly been involved in those conversations, and it's the longer term planning, so the 30-year there's a lot of looking for a 30-year business case of which Kiwirail and Auckland Transport are working very closely together on. It's about, just to expand a little bit more, if I'm able to, it's about what Dave's referring to there, and Damien was making sure that we've provisioned sufficient slots, if you like, from demand for regional passenger rail into the overall plan as we do the modelling. And so Dave's right that they've added not only the Northern Explorer, effectively a service going in each direction each day. So we've provisioned for that in the modelling. We've provisioned for a interregional service operating two slots every hour, for example. So these are sort of base assumptions on which the longer term modelling and capacity of the Auckland network has been anchored off. And so it's naturally a lot of those business cases still need to go through all of their pieces, but it was just saying that we've actually made allowance for that in the long run, in the long-term planning, so that when you look at growth scenarios, we're working out where the constraints in the network actually are, and certainly how those inter-regional services where they start and stop in the Auckland network is also in a big factor in that as well. So, and I think it's there's lots more that could go into it. There's a heck of a lot of work going on in the background, but I think that added a little bit more context, hopefully.
Thank you for that, Damien.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. Just to note that Waikato Regional Council staff have been invited into the process as well. So we are thinking wider than just Auckland. It is how Auckland connects with the national network, and certainly the longer term requirements for interregional rail are being considered, and it will highlight the need for appropriate facilities. The point to note is that it's at program business case phase, so it's sort of a longer term strategic look.
And Chair, Jose has been active in those sessions and certainly expressing the views of the council in a very firm and clear view. So he's had your interest at heart, absolutely.
He's a good young fella. Okay, we've got a resolution up there. Angela, you said you wanted to change it on the numbers. The subcommittee approves the following two Huia average weekly demand targets. Hang on.
Bouncing between the.
Stop, bounce backwards. There we go. That's it there. Do you want to change that, or you? I can see it. There it is. So the average daily demand is 400 passengers. Yep. Yes.
If I may, Deborah or Dave, could I just seek a clarification here in respect of the demand targets, as they are currently part of the business case? Would it be more appropriate to, in effect, set this motion aside and deal with the revision to the demand targets as part of the resolution that's been foreshadowed by Councillor Strange in relation to update to the business case to reflect those other dimensions that were discussed?
I'll take that. Look, I think that this is a holding pattern until we look at everything. So I'm sort of pretty relaxed about it because I think we're going to revisit a lot very soon. I'm not against this notion now, but I think we'll be looking at it differently when the work's been completed.
Well, I want to deal with this issue now. If you want to change that one word, it doesn't matter. If you want to leave it the same, it doesn't matter.
Oh, I think it's a good idea to change the weekday to daily. I was actually talking about the entire notion of the targets and what they say in answer to Mike's question. I'm hoping that's seen as a positive thing. I'm not trying to be unhelpful. I'm trying to be very open-minded. It might be premature.
Do you want to defer a decision on this, or just change the word to?
The key thing here is the parameters upon which we do our 2-year review. So this is why this is a key piece.
Can I suggest we take it offline, given that you'll be very interested in how we feel about that? Let's not maybe make it a matter for this group. Feels like something that we could talk about offline and maybe come back with a good plan, one that's helpful, not unhelpful. This feels a bit arbitrary.
Happy to take your advice on that. So if you want to wind this up, the resolution now will be that this matter is deferred for further consultation between staff and NZTA.
Does it come back to elected members for reference?
Oh, yes. Always. All those in favour, please say aye. Have I got the seconder? Seconder over here. Ewan Wilson.
Mr. Chair, I just asked a question, not as a smart-ass comment, but I specifically asked, when does it come back to elected members for reference?
As soon as it has worked through the system and both parties are happy with the outcome, but bearing in mind that we need it for the 2-year review.
Which is when? Because that's another issue that I wanted to...
When do you need it back by?
With all due respect, I think it needs a reference to a couple of the elected members here. You know, what you're talking about offline, that doesn't, you know, we've had problems when things have been offline on a technical basis. This is much more than just a technical discussion. I'd like to say those three to be consulted with over there.
The next meeting we'll get the item there.
The 2-year review is due to commence based on the timeline in page 37 of the report in January next year. So we need to resolve the issue by then, but we will need to start ensure that what we report to the agency at the end of this financial year aligns with where we're at right now. So we've got a bit of time. We can bring it back to a committee for your discussion as the committee wishes.
That's not going to help with the proposal that you want, where you want to get something going in the next short while, maybe when the ETP's ready.
Deborah, comment again.
Getting more messy.
I'd be quite keen just to have a longer chat about this. So it would definitely come back to this group, and there is no reason to stop doing anything in the meantime. The targets are just frankly made up things at the moment. I don't want to make them sound trivial, but they shouldn't be holding us back. So I definitely think that we should be back at this table having people approve them, but I'm not sure that we're all in the right space right now to be clear about what they are, given that we're going to have a bit of an analysis. And absolutely, you're going to want to make sure that they put the service in the best light for the review. So I just feel like that's probably not a position we're in right now to make a decision on, but really soon we would be. And happy to bounce back. I know that it's hard to ask questions in this forum, but the intention is to be constructive. And at this stage, I don't think we can dictate those numbers that is going to move us forward at all. I mean, we could write them down. We'll just be back again looking at them quite soon.
Okay, thank you for that advice.
Motion has on for the last hour.
We have passed the motion. What is your comment, sir?
Well, I have had the light on for a fair old while without waving my hand around like a banshee. Couple of questions.
Comments are always welcome, sir.
Thank you. Just in regard to, before you put it, like targets and all that are very important, but that is really like looking and shuffling the decks, shuffling the chairs in the Titanic. A couple of points I'd like to make, and if Mark could perhaps consider them and your staff, just the marketing I am kind of am concerned in regard to presentation at the Strand. Having visited that recently, it's still nowhere near as good as I'd like to see. Signage, Mark, poor. Strand. Still see graffiti. You're doing your best there, but graffiti at Huntley looks like the train doesn't run anymore. Other comments I'd like you to consider is if the new CEO has been appointed for Kiwi Rail, you should be down to see that person too. Has there been a new CEO appointed?
Yes.
Yes, Peter Reedy starts on the 1st of, we welcome him back for a second stint at Kiwi Rail.
Who's that?
Peter Reedy.
Oh,
Peter Reedy.
He's the guy that out of, he was, I think, Farmlands, and now I think he's at Sea Lord.
Fletcher's.
Great. Can we perhaps see him, Hugh? Meet with him? Do you think that'd be important?
That can be looked at.
Slots are important, do you think? Okay. Also, with the elections, I believe that 3 months' time, you're going to have a new mayor in Auckland. We've got to actually, AT, while it's not direct, they own it and they're answerable to it. Very important. We had a good relationship with Phil Goff. Very important that we do that. And also, I believe that we should be continuing to engage with the Minister of Transport, Michael Wood, on what we're doing. Local. Yeah, agreed. Okay on those, Mark? Thank you.
David Shepherd, you got a quick comment before I go on to Pōkeno?
No, hand down, Deb
Hand down,
covered it.
thank you very much.
We're here to help.
Pōkeno, tell us all about Pōkeno.
Hang on, I had a question about something else in that slot. That was the 2-year review. I wanted a bit more of an explanation, probably from Deb maybe, about why the 2-year review is having to be done after less than a year and a half's operation by the time it's due. I know we were proposing that there be a delay in the review because of COVID, but for a few months.
We approved that delay. We agree. We totally agree. We approved all of that. We're with you. We're not doing the thing that you said.
Okay, so we're not we're taking COVID time off into account.
Correct. Yep.
Great.
Pōkeno, go quickly before something else comes in.
Thank you, Chairperson. Kia ora katoa. So this report essentially seeks the endorsement of the committee for a feasibility study for a railway station at Pōkeno, on the understanding that that station could possibly in the short run support Te Huia, but in the long run become part of the Auckland rail network. Waikato District Council has $50,000, which includes 51% Waka Kotahi cost share in its current LTP, set aside for a feasibility study for Te Kovata that was agreed on when Council supported the railway station at Huntly. But we will obviously need to reallocate that funding for a feasibility study for Pōkeno if this committee, endorses the approach. So we'll need to go back to our council to do that. Also, this reallocation request aligns to a number of other studies underway. Hamilton to Auckland Rapid Rail, which the Ministry of Transport is leading, which is looking obviously at a direct link between Hamilton and Auckland, but that's on the understanding that, we'll probably look at the other towns in the Waikato as part of either a milk train service, which Te Huia could become, or connecting Northern Waikato to the Auckland network. As Damien mentioned, the work that Auckland Transport is doing on a program business case with regards to future metro rail service concepts, and also the addendum to the original Te Huia single stage business case as well, which includes a Te Huia level of service post City Rail Link opening, which includes Pōkeno as a possible station. So Chair, just with a bit of background, the committee will be aware that the single stage business case did include Tuako and Pōkeno as options. However, cost factors, and also the Hamilton to Auckland corridor work, which started looking at Pōkeno and Tuko as part of the Auckland Rail network, and then some work that Waikato District Council and Waka Kotahi was doing on a transport program business case, just shifted the focus to Huntly. But the business case, the market research done at that time did indicate that there'll be quite a lot of patronage from Northern Waikato if there is to be a future station at Pōkeno. And that will also help with the targets we spoke about earlier as well. So, and that market could potentially extend further out into Hauraki and Thames Coromandel because of State Highway 2. And also when Waikato Regional Council did its consultation on its 2021-2031 LTP, there were quite a few submissions on Te Huia, I think about 1,200 submissions on Te Huia, and quite a few of those submissions came from people in the Northern Waikato requesting that Te Huia service the Northern Waikato. And then as the committee will be aware, Minister Wood, when he relaunched Te Huia in January, did indicate his aspiration for a station at Pōkeno. Following that, Mayor Allen, our Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Patterson had a meeting with Minister Wood just to understand his comments a bit more. And the Minister did indicate, yep, that's his aspiration, but he did acknowledge that it will need to be supported by a feasibility study and also be backed by this committee. Just in terms of growth, the Pōkeno currently has a population of around 3,000, but has capacity to grow to around 13,000 people in the future. So certainly from a growth perspective, you know, there is a market there, and a lot of the commute will be to Auckland. Also on page 42 of the report, you will see that council does own land for a potential station at Pōkeno. And also on page 43, there is a diagrammatic layout of what the park and ride facility could look like, catering for about 60 to 70 cars. And yes, if needed in the future, we will need to look at expanding that by purchasing additional land. But this is just a start. And also Flow Consulting did a transport assessment earlier this year, which shows that the railway station at Pōkeno would be a key transport priority to service that town and the surrounding area. So I guess the key issue, Chairperson, is that yes, WDC has some funding in its LTP, that's 50K, which is made up of Waka Kotahi subsidy, but this may not be adequate for a feasibility study. So we estimate that the feasibility study could be around 100K. So it would require partnership funding from the partners. There is also no funding at this stage for a detailed business case, which may follow the feasibility study. But we'll need to have a discussion with Waka Kotahi and the Regional Council whether there's another way forward rather than going through a DBC process, which can be quite protracted. But that's a discussion we'll need to have. And also the feasibility study obviously will need to weigh the pros and cons between having an additional stop for Te Huia versus more patronage numbers as per the targets we discussed earlier, but that can be teased out through the feasibility study. So, Chairperson, that's just a broad overview of the report. So bottom line is that we've got some money as council in our LTP for a feasibility study for Te Kovata. We'll need to, and Councillor Patterson will raise this at the Infrastructure Committee meeting on Monday, to reallocate that funding to Pōkeno if this committee is in support of it. But also just to note that that money is not going to be enough. We'll need probably another 50K short for that feasibility study. So just putting that forward for you to consider.
So do you want two parts of this? You want this committee to endorse taking the money from TK and putting it into Pōkeno? That's your first part, and now you're throwing in an extra one, and if we endorse it, we've got to front up with some money.
Yep.
It's not in my resolution.
No, it's not.
Okay, I've got Russ, I've got Eugene, and I've got Angela.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I would like to move the as a resolution on the board with the addition of that $50,000 the grant from the Waikato Regional Council for the to match the Waikato District Council for 3 stations. That's been Tikapota, Pōkeno, and I also think you should look at Tuakau. Tuakau has been a very, very long-standing group of persons there. There's a station there. It's those that have been there, you'll see it's actually an island, so it's not easy because it's costly. If we can actually get access across, you can, but it's costly. And given the new kind of requirements to work and safety, I think it may not be a runner. But we need to satisfy that northern Waikato group that we have taken them into account with this review. That's my opinion. Just in regard to the I think some will work quite, we can tick quite, when that review comes back, you'll find the land is through good kind of Waikato District Council planning, about the only planning they did at Pōkeno, is the acquisition of land. In time that will become a park and ride, and that will benefit the whole of South Auckland, the same as the former mayor of Hamilton City had the foresight to buy that land at the base, which gave a fantastic opportunity as a regional transport hub for the whole of the Waikato, the whole of the Central North Island in many ways. But Pōkeno, like you say, it might be 2,000, but it's going to be 13,000. And persons coming from Tikapota, I'm guessing something like 10, 15 minutes on the motorway. So I think that the review, I certainly would like this Waikato Regional Council to also match Waikato District Council. Our role is transport, and that is one of our core businesses. And I believe that we owe it to the Waikato District Council to ensure that we are stumping up with some money. You've got Sleepyhead. Well, some of us agreed, some of us disagreed. It is going to have 1,000 workers there. And again, it's going to give good linkages to the city of Auckland, of where many of those persons have lived for a generation or two. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ, for those recommendations. I go to Eugene.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will second that recommendation.
You'll move it, actually.
And okay, happy to move it. Remington's happy to do that. Look, I just, Vishal, you've actually covered it off really well, this whole report. We did take the opportunity from Minister Wood comments service earlier in the year, and the meeting we did have with him, he was very supportive of, we all know that, very supportive of Te Huia and what's going on. Well aware we need to get more bums on seats. He thinks this is a good opportunity. Pōkeno's growing extremely fast, and 90% of commute goes back in towards the city. It also gives great opportunity with our earlier discussions of bringing people from the north back into Hamilton as well. So, you know, I think it's a very good idea, and something we really need to support.
Yeah. It's all right, I'm trying to read on this. I think you can take out the recommended by there and put it in as another one, and Eugene will move it. The 50K extra from us.
Yeah,
I'm sure you'll move that.
Yeah, I'll move that.
Yeah.
So, Chair, can I ask a procedural question?
Room more than one.
Can I ask a procedural question? We can. Do you have questions before debate?
No.
Right. Okay. No problem. I'm just trying to get my head around understanding. Because I've got a number of technical questions of the motion that I need to have answered before I know if I'm going to support it or not. And usually you would be able to ask questions.
You can. It's not as simple as that, and especially with the system, the sound system that we have in place, to get somebody to take their red light off and then come back in line is extremely difficult. So therefore, I will be directed by the red lights, which is stop, but it actually means go. So I now go to Angela. You may debate the issue or ask a question, and then I will go to you.
I will have my questions first. Thank you. And then, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Michelle, for your work on this. I suggest you leave your light on. Yeah, park and ride. Just intuitively, it'll be full from day one. There's a huge catchment, you know, heading to Pōkeno. Like you did say, from the wider area. I note that over in London, they're going up and building apartments on top of stations to pay for the infrastructure underneath. So perhaps that could be an option. I just had a question around in the bus service, point 25 on page 43.
Yep.
So you're looking at a bus service to go from Pōkeno to Papakura in the short term.
Yeah. So,
and is that with us or with Auckland Transport?
So this is with Regional Council. So we've got money in our existing LTP for a trial bus service. And that this report is actually going to Infrastructure Committee on Monday in terms of that bus service between Pōkeno and Papakura. So we just see that as an interim type of service, you know, whilst we do this work at the feasibility study.
Okay. Yeah. I'll look forward to hearing more about that. There it goes. Let's leave it on, Eugene. Fantastic. Point 28, you talk about by being diesel powered to Huia can do a staged approach. Is that because of the electrification work?
Yeah.
From P to P?
Yeah. So we'll need to work, I mean, you know, the mechanics of having the station and a stop there, we'll need to factor that in relation to the Auckland network. So, yeah. And I'm sure, I know David has his hands up as well, so he may want to comment on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a couple more questions. I know there's a difference between CapEx and OpEx and who owns what. And I know that the platforms and the stations at Huntly and Rotakoti were funded with 51% from FAR funding. Oh, 100.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, my mistake. Just wondering in regards to Pōkeno, you know, who would own that moving forward, like the infrastructure? So would it be owned by WDC as the others are owned by respective councils?
We'll see the same model being applied to Pōkeno. Bear in mind, we expect this to be teased out if the feasibility study says, yep, a station at Pōkeno makes sense. We would need to take this to the next step in terms of, you know, what type of station. Is it just a basic platform initially? And then part of that will be funding and the ownership elements. But that's council land, and we would obviously, you know, well, with regards to that.
Thank you. And one final question, I believe. Point 40. Just wondering about the construction of a pedestrian overbridge and health and safety and how the regulator feels about a very basic platform.
Yeah, look, I mean, the pedestrian overbridge, and if you see in the diagram, the graphic on page 42, it's really to connect that that western side of Pōkeno to the station and the town centre. And it's something which, we have identified, and it's that bridge could be for pedestrians as well for cyclists, just to integrate the town a bit more across the railway line. So that's something we have acknowledged as council, and it will be included as part of that feasibility study as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I'm really interested in where this goes moving. I'll hold my thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Ewan and then I'll go to David Shepherd to answer these technical questions.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Can I just have a clarification? This committee is a subcommittee of WRC, Waikato Region, yeah. But our mandate, our terms of reference is Te Huia. So from a governance standpoint, what are we talking, why are we even discussing an infrastructural spend in another jurisdiction? Surely that is a matter for Waikato Regional District Council. It's not a matter for Te Huia. So can I just have a clarification as to what?
The only inclusion in this resolution is that this subcommittee ask Waikato Regional Council to contribute $50,000 towards the business case along with their $50,000. Those are the only financials that are in there.
Right. So we're an advocate on behalf of.
We don't have any money to spend without reference to our bosses.
But those funds aren't coming from any funds put aside for Te Huia, are they?
That's as I understand the resolution.
Right. So they're not coming from Te Huia funds, and this is just an informal request of Waikato Regional Council to consider.
It's a formal request.
Formal request, yeah. But surely Waikato District Council will be making a formal request to WRC.
They've made it today.
So we're doing through the report, just to get the support of the committee for the feasibility study. It will have implications for the Te Huia service in the short term, at least.
Right, but the other option would have been to go to the parent of the subcommittee, which is the proper regional transport that deals with buses and everything else. Yeah.
Right. System is being worked here, but we've got a member of this committee that has put up a report on Pōkeno, and they have requested that matching funds are put towards their business case for Pōkeno. This committee recognises that and can either say, nah, we don't support regional council paying the other 50,000, or we do. So it's in the resolution that we do support regional council funding with 50,000.
Right, thank you. My next question is, I've heard you say that obviously Te Huia could, as an option, look at utilising a station. Who else could? What other operator could? Could AT look at using it?
Yeah, well, look, I guess the work that AT will be doing in terms of its future station concepts and link to the Auckland network, which could possibly extend electrification further down south to Pōkeno, will have implications for Pōkeno and Turko, presumably. So, but in terms of, whether Pōkeno and Turko becomes part of that Auckland network in the future, that's a distinct possibility, but it needs to come out of that work that Damien and his team are doing with regards to the program business case. But this is just looking at to maximize patronage on Te Huia in the short term. What can we do? If the feasibility study indicates, yes, a platform, basic platform, not a gold-plated version, but a basic platform in the short term would help to increase patronage and support the community in the northern Waikato, then certainly something that we want to progress, whilst, and in the long term, that station could potentially become part of the Auckland network.
Okay, thank you. I'll wait for the debate. I just needed that clarification because I wasn't quite sure of our terms of reference. It didn't quite
Pretty
seem to
fluid,
sit. I can see, very fluid. Yeah.
David Shepherd.
Thank you. So it's more just, I suppose, some statements. I'm very supportive of kind of a longer term kind of view with Te Huia, and I applaud the kind of the idea. Particularly, I think the connection into the addendum that Phil King sort of spoke of earlier, which is really looking at a kind of a post CRL, which isn't actually that far away, 2025. It would, but also mindful of the fact that there are a number of moving parts, particularly with the P2P work, but the two brand new sort of high-spec stations that are going to be built at Drury. So I think that they are certainly part of the mix. And I think if you are looking to connect Pōkeno into a future or potentially connect it into an Auckland Metro situation, I would advocate to WDC to be connected and make sure that they do get the submission into the Auckland PBC so that it can be part of the mix. So while Jose has been advocating from a Waikato Regional Council perspective for Te Huia, it hasn't been around sort of connecting Waikato District Council in the way that sort of has been discussed. So really, I do think that this is a part of and should be a part of the wider discussion that's actually a part of the addendum work.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Eugene.
Thank you. I was just going back to trying to answer Councillor Strange's questions around the bus services in that area and what's happening there. So there is a paper coming to our infrastructure committee on Monday, and that's utilising WDC funds that were collected but weren't matched by Waka Kotahi when the cutbacks happened. That instead of leaving that sitting there rolling it over, let's look at how we can connect those communities and transport and really improve that PT in that area. So that we sort of normally would work on making sure we had match funding with that. Unfortunately, we haven't, but that portion left over, let's utilise that and improve that PT in that northern area. Also, in regard to the overbridge, if that's a possibility or not a possibility in the future, and how we connect the east and west side of that, is we have had a lot of discussions around utilising some of those funds if this station comes along in the future too, around DRS services and all of that, moving people around to connect in with that park and ride facility. It's more of a comment.
I've got a mover for the motion, which was Eugene. Do I have a seconder?
Kia ora, through the chair, just a pārtai, if we could.
Donald, go.
Just to WDC, does that mean that any Te Kaupata has taken off the radar for a potential station in the future?
Eugene will answer that.
Yeah, through you, Chair Donald. In the immediate future, yes, and that came about because we identified that, which was a few years ago, around that Te Kaupata as a station, as the next cab off the rank, was around the growth happening there with the lakeside development there. That has sort of somewhat, Kāinga has purchased 1,300 sections in that area, and they haven't been able to move as fast as I'd say they would have liked. And because of the rapid growth in Pōkeno and where it's at and the transport flows, instead of sitting there sort of doing nothing for some time, because we believe that the business case may not stack up in that Te Kaupata area currently, that we saw that there was potential to get better use out of the Te Huia service by looking at identifying Pōkeno as the next option.
Kia ora, Councillor Patterson. Cheers.
Jeff, if I can just add to that, should a station at Pōkeno be feasible, we could work with the regional council to look at putting some bus services between Te Kaupata and Pōkeno, just a short trip up the road. So that's something we could look at doing in the interim as well. So to service to make sure that people in Te Kaupata, who a large portion of whom commute to Auckland, can go to Pōkeno and catch a train into Auckland.
Okay, your resolution's up there. Any comments? No? Angela?
Just in regards to WRC's contribution, just ask of our staff what pool of funding that may come from, as currently we only rate directly for Hamilton City. Just a curious question.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, one of the pieces of advice that we'll have to look at, or one of the things we would have to look at through this, is what the appropriate potential funding sources for this. And to my mind, there are two. The most apparent is obviously the Te Huia rate reserve that's been gathered for the service. Noting though that that is rated that's rated of Hamilton City residents. The second option is that the Regional Public Transport Plan foreshadows investigations in North Waikato for additional stations in the North Waikato. An option would be that if there were any surpluses within that budget, that the planning budget following the completion of the PT, some of that may be made available. Those are two potential funding sources, but I don't know the quantum of either of them at the moment.
I'm not quite finished. Sorry. Yeah, I had a question around timing. When were you needing the 50K? Sorry, Vishal, people online won't be able to hear you. Ewan, you might just need to.
Okay, sorry, we'll need to work out the appropriate procurement arrangements, whether this work is procured through district council or regional council. So we need to have a discussion with Mark on that. But we want to start this work as soon as possible, and possibly, go out to tender or look at the company that did the work for the single stage business case to just proceed with this feasibility study. So that's, and hopefully have it done once it's procured in 6 months' time, and then come back to the committee then.
Thank you. If I may, just one further question. Just thinking along the lines of our PT Business Improvement Review, and when we are looking to rate more wider, just Hamilton City and the Northeastern Block, and how that sort of rating model might feed more into this sort of appropriation of funds. Mark, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, this is precisely the reason why I'm strongly of the view that we need to adopt a regional approach to rating public transport services and some infrastructure. This Te Huia, as we know, has, if not regional, definite sub-regional benefits that don't respect territorial authority boundaries. And to me, it makes an awful lot of sense to be able to put together a strategic plan for funding both investigations and investment in infrastructure and services without the constraints that our current funding model has. I have a feeling that Councillor Wilson may speak to some of the outworkings of the current constraints of the funding model and the challenges that presents in terms of the perception of fairness of who pays for what.
I will, if I can ever get onto your speaking. Yeah, look, I want to strongly express my opposition to Hamilton ratepayers having made a contribution for the Te Huia service, that those funds being used to enable a feasibility study in the Waikato District Council area. I don't believe that's appropriate. I believe the Waikato District Council, who has made a small contribution to the Te Huia project, needs to dig deeper in their pockets and their ratepayers and get them to fund their own feasibility study. I feel very strongly about that. And I would also say to my friends at the Waikato Regional Council, there would be some real concerns if you were to use funds that we have rated our ratepayers for you then to unilaterally use it on infrastructure in a different jurisdiction. That's just not cricket. So I will not be supporting the motion unless it expressly states that there's only one funding pool that this comes from, and it's the Waikato Regional Council, and it's not out of the funds put aside by Hamiltonian ratepayers for Te Huia. I mean, that's just not fair. Waikato Regional District Council ratepayers need to put the money in. It's an extra 50,000.
What you're advocating needs some clarification on that last point, that the committee recommends that Waikato Regional Council contribute 50K towards a study.
Yeah, and expressly excludes using one of the options Mark had suggested, which is our funds rated by Hamiltonian ratepayers for Te Huia.
I don't, through you, the chair, look, I have no argument with that. I couldn't sit comfortably knowing that we've used Hamilton City's money to do that. So I'm totally okay with that. And get what you're saying, Councillor Wilson. Just a question that Mark might be able to help is did we, through this group here, set aside 100K some time back for Puanui, some feasibility study on that, which we did not end up using?
It's a business case.
Yeah, for business case for Puanui, which subsequently Puanui come online, and we did not require that money.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I will have to look into that because yes, if my memory serves me, there was an allocation made towards feasibility for, well, anticipating potentially a significant business case for Puanui, including and that a alternative kind of low cost implementation was found for that didn't necessitate that same level of investigation and investment. So I'll take that on advisement and understand exactly what that is. However, I would say that in respect of the budgets that we've had presented at the moment and that the team are working on, were there savings that would have been rebuilt back into that surplus that would be intended to be used for operational costs. So it's not kind of sitting there as an unallocated amount. But I'm more than happy to follow up on the question of the Puanui business case.
You happy with the wording of that?
Yes, I am.
You happy to second the motion? Any other? Oh, Russ, over there.
I think Ewan makes a good point because you're 7/8 of the money on this, and Waikato District Council have always been very slow in putting money up, and when you actually dig down deep, you find actually they put done all money up, and really they're one of the biggest, apart from Hamilton City, beneficiaries from this wonderful service. But I think Mark has made a very good point, Mr. Chair. You've got to look at our kind of budgets, our funds in regard where we can, what pockets we can get this money from, because it's very important that we are a regional council. We are responsible for regional transport. You might make the point that there's boundaries, but we as a council, there are no boundaries. I think we've got to look, Mark, to see whether we can find the 50K without kind of inflicting it onto Hamilton ratepayers. That wouldn't sit comfortably with me. I believe that we've got to put some money up, help Waikato District Council. You've got to find the money. That's why you're a director.
Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would also not feel comfortable with Hamilton ratepayer money going towards this, hence my line of questioning before. I understand that we are a regional council in charge of regional PT. However, the current funding model is really restrictive. Yeah, as that last resolution recommendation stands, yeah, I'm happy to support all of that. But yeah, acknowledging that we do need to move forward with rating regionally as soon as possible, which I understand Mark has in hand. So yeah, thank you.
Can I just, through you, the chair, look, WDC is very supportive of a new funding model for PT, and I know we've been talking about this for a little while now, and so yeah, you know, we understand that the current model doesn't work and isn't fair or spread properly. So you're very supportive of a new funding model, which doesn't sort this out now, but definitely will help in the future. Thank you. Yep. Well, if WRC get all of their ducks in a row, I know what's going to, so for sure.
Okay. The motion is there on the board. It's moved and seconded. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those contrary say no. Motion is carried. Thank you very much. We move on to the next agenda item, which is endorsement direction of the regional public transport plan on Te Huia. Moved Angela Strange, seconded Eugene Patterson. But don't go away just yet. Any questions that you want to ask of Andrew, or you're happy with what's in the plan? There being no questions, I put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. The motion is carried. Andrew, you're dismissed.
That's the best meeting I've ever been part of. Thank you very much.
We move on to the final agenda item, which is financial and performance update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a continuation of a regular report that you've received through the governance group, presentation of the patronage and financial results for the last period. So again, propose to take the report as read and answer any questions that you might have.
Moved, Councillor Strange.
If I could.
One question, go.
In light of Waka Kotahi's letter, that as far as I understand it, basically says, look, funds that weren't spent need to be returned back. Are we physically going to write them a refund check? Is that the plan? Is that what's happening?
Should I take that?
Yes, go, Deb.
The way it works is that you claim money spent, so there's no refund check. You haven't claimed it. It doesn't exist yet. It's not come to you.
You haven't got the money.
Okay. That helps me understand it. It was a silly question then. Thank you.
No further questions on this financial item? Moved, Councillor Strange, seconded by Eugene Patterson. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you. The motion is carried. Before we close the meeting, we need to go back to the earlier item that we have rewritten a resolution, which is option C. Can you bring it up on the board, please? Don Turner. Yeah, can I just bring it up so that you can see what we're discussing now? Go further down, don't you? There it is, there's the item.
Can I ask a question about number 2, please, Mr. Chair?
You can try.
Is probably not.
Yeah.
Yep. Is that, in your understanding, I guess, Mark or Chair Hugh, include the possibility of looking at Sunday and public holiday services, that where it's talking about travel for recreation and leisure, or is that not your intention to have a look at that? Because I know that's one of the service improvements that this group or this group's forerunner had looked at.
Yes, through Mr. Chair, the intention behind the resolution is, and particularly the mention of those factors, the weekend, weekday services, two-way demand and travel for recreation and leisure, is really to expand the scope of services. So hence, haven't specifically mentioned days of the week in respect of whether it's a Wednesday, Thursday or Friday, whether or not it's additional, moving to full services on Saturday or the Sunday additional. The intention here is really to widen the scope in light of what we've read. And if I can just go a little bit further, and probably getting myself a little bit ahead of things, is that I think what we would likely be aiming to do is not specify specific service levels within an updated business case, which was absolutely necessary to demonstrate the start point. But as things evolve, we've already seen the need to quickly iterate services, and this would be just another waypoint on the way.
Be able to be flexible without getting tied in knots because of something you said 2 years ago before there was another pandemic or something.
That's right, and through Mr. Chair, importantly, being able to measure the success of the service against these benefits, where at the moment the success of the service, if the business case is left as it is when it's evaluated, will be its success as a commuter service from Hamilton to Auckland. We know now from what we've learned that the benefits of the service are far broader than that.
Okay, I have a mover. Do I have a seconder? Ewan seconds. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. The motion is carried, and thank you for your attendance today. That concludes our. Oh, Donald. Donald, are you still there?
Yeah.
Oh, you
Yeah,
are. You said you're going to leave early. Donald, close us down, please.
Question to the chair.
You got a question first. Go.
Yep. The COVID practices on Te Huia, what do they look like? And is there what's that feedback given the transitioning over this short period?
Say again, Donald. We couldn't quite hear.
Just the COVID practices.
COVID practices.
What is it on the train? I haven't been on there, and just seeing how that's going.
What's practice when COVID?
So consistent with public transport services nationally, masks are required on board, and there is signage on the train advising of distance and people monitoring themselves and their environment as they're travelling on the service.
No, that's fine. Just clarifying, because there's a lot of changes that have happened. No, that's fine, and I'm happy to do the karakia now if you want, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you, Donald.
Okay, kia ora everybody. Nā whakaaro, nā kōrero. Hope you all have a happy day and continue to do good mahi. Okay, on that note, kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ariki ai hukaraiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. Ake ake. Āmene.
Thank you, Donald. Thank you for everybody that came in virtually and contributed to our meeting. The meeting is now closed.
And could I just add a special little thanks to Phil King? Phil's got some, we know the amount of history and technical detail that's been added to this in between when Phil was last involved and now being re-involved in the service. So I'd just like to thank Phil, Trudy and the rest of her team as well for stepping in and and helping us carry the service forward.